about finishes. DecoArt makes the Janson Art Traditions paint and the varnish. And DecoArt also makes their regular matte and satin and gloss varnishes. Both products are excellent. All finishing products are excellent. I have to say though, the Traditions varnish is pretty neat because I don't know if you've ever finished a piece, but you're getting ready to base coat, and you're brushing it on, and you get these little drag things. In normal varnish, nothing will help you do that. You just have to move quicker, and you have to not let it dry so much. With Traditions varnish, you can pre-wet, or you can wet your surface, or you can dip your brush into some water, and reawaken that varnish so it prevents those things from happening. Board that I painted when I was at Kingsland and Gibilisco. And this board, you know, I didn't quite finish it with all the right shadows and things like that, but I'm going to use this. The lesson was not about finishings here, so, but it's pretty much mostly done. I'm going to talk about the first things that you do when you're getting ready to varnish something. Let's just talk about what to do right first. The first thing that you do is you look for any kind of graphite lines that you have on the piece, either white or chalk or whatever, and you erase them. Okay, any kinds of those things that you have. Okay, you want to sign your piece. Okay, get any kind of anything off of there that you know shouldn't be there. If you've got to patch something, patch it before you varnish it. Okay, so then you can varnish with any kind of brush. You could varnish brush, and this is an oval glaze brush. If I were to choose between the two of these, I would choose the oval glaze brush because it is shaved either way, tapered, and then it's also cut in a circle right there. This is cut so that all the bristles sit down at one time, so you get a beautiful float, but it's not so great for varnishing. Now on a big piece like this, and this is 16, 18 inches by maybe say 10 or 11, I wouldn't use either of those. I would use my varnish sponge, or I would roll on with the white roller that you saw. Now the roller is going to get you a little bit of a bumpy texture. This is going to give you very smooth, very even, very fine coats, okay? So I would honestly go with this because it goes really, really fast. Now I'm going to show you how fast that goes. Turn my piece. This has got no varnish on it yet. So I'm going to use the Janson product. I think that is just absolutely a superior product. It's compatible with DecoArt. Okay. You can use your varnish sponge wet or dry. Wet in the case of using the Janson varnish might be a smart idea. Okay, you want to give yourself some space. Okay, make sure you don't have any debris on here. I'm noticing that on another piece that I have, this was another practice board. I very obviously have some glaze on here, but in one of these corners, I have little bits of lint and fluff. It really behooves you to wipe all that stuff off before you start. Okay, so I'm just going to dip flat into my varnish. Okay, oops, and I have a dog hair running around. Okay, and then just wipe in nice even. It doesn't clump. It's nice and smooth. You can go in both directions. You're going to hold your piece down. You need to keep moving though. You can't like stop and then come back to it. Nice thin coats. I can go in that direction because I'm going so quickly with such big strokes. It doesn't dry. Now what this does do is it's going to be so flat and so thin that in order to build up, there, I'm all done. Okay, I'll show you the other kind. I'm putting that in water right now just to prevent it from drying. I have absolutely no ridges, no streaks, no bubbling, nothing. So what I'm going to show you after this dries, if I wanted to wet sand this piece, I would have a problem with this because if I only did 2 or 3 of these thin coats, I would probably do 5 of this thin kind of coat. This is going to be dry instantly, like 3 minutes from now it's going to be dry. And so I can quickly, in 15 minutes or so, do 5 coats of varnish. I can blow dry in between. And and then I can wet sand. But if you don't have 3 or 4 coats of varnish in between, then you'll sand off some of your details, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so with this piece right here, I want to show you one thing that you never, ever, ever, ever do. I've done this. I do this a lot, but you never do it. But I know this. Okay, I'm going to show you on one half of this piece. Never pour your varnish directly onto your piece. And the reason for that is no matter what, I always pour too much. Never even pour a little bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. Do you see how we're just moving piles of varnish around? Now if I was out of space, then what I would be getting is I would be getting these ridges. Now what you can do to prevent this, because I have got a lot of ridges, I'm not sure if you can see. No, I think you can. Okay. I have got ridgy, ridgy, ridgy. I did this on a Debbie Cole piece that I did one time. It turned out gorgeous. And I thought they'd settle. I thought these ridges would just, you know, flatten out. And, no. So what I would do, let me back you up a little bit. Okay, what I would do is I would take my varnishing brush and I would wipe it out in my varnish. Just wiping that off on there. And I go back into my varnish and continue smoothing, wiping off as I continued. Okay, now if you're using Traditions varnish, then what you can do is you can dip into some water and you can kind of wake it up a little bit. Okay, wiping off. Okay, and with a brush you're always going to get just a little bit of brush marks unless... Okay. And what you can do with Traditions varnish that you can't do with others, I'm going to get a bottle of medium here. I've got my medium, which is Traditions extender. I can put a little bit of extender and varnish on my palette, not in on my piece. Uh-oh, but I got a piece of chunk on there. So if I get streaks, say I'm dry, and I get these streaks, your next coat of varnish might take that out. Now with Traditions, I can still go back right now, dip into some water, and I can wake it back up again and work it out. Okay, don't want to put a lot of water on there, but just get it all woke back up again and work that out. A lot of long strokes. You don't want to do this with varnishing little strokes. Okay, you want to do long, even strokes. Okay, but if I'm doing a big, long piece of furniture or something like that, right? And I've got to have even, and I've got to have brushability and all that kind of stuff. What you can do is you can mix your extender into your varnish, because the mediums are all compatible, and now you can put that on there and the leveling time is going to increase drastically. Okay, so you're not going to have any streaks. It's going to be a beautiful finish. It will take a lot longer to dry. Okay, a lot longer. But you will have excellent leveling. And I can tell the difference just looking at this right here. It gives me a little bit more liquid for my varnish to roll around in. And this one I've got a couple of streaks. Okay, but we're going to talk about that kind of thing. Alright, so I've got my cardboard here, and it's been varnished once before, but what I want to talk about now is when you dip into your varnish, okay, you've got your varnish right over here, dip into it a little bit, and you start brushing, and things start streaking and pulling because you don't have any moisture in your brush. They're very, very flat. This is when it's a good idea to put a little bit extra varnish and have it be juicier and press down on your whole brush. The whole brush. Work the varnish. Don't just let it sit on top. You actually work it in. Okay, work it. I'm pressing, splaying out my bristles. Okay, this is going to be a much nicer finish of varnish. It's very, very flat. Let's see if we can get you. Okay, not a lot of ridges and stuff. As you can do a crackle effect okay? And the crackle effect is going to happen when you put, now this is on top of, now this is a very cool medium. So I've got my windmills painted, I've got my tulips, and I've got my border, and you know, I've got everything painted. And now I want to make it look like it's cracked. Okay, it's one step crackle. Crackle medium, the thicker that you apply the medium, the bigger the cracks will be. Here, get you on there. Okay. So you don't want to take this and work it like this. I'm going to go ahead and do that right here. I'm going to work that medium into that piece. Okay, now this sits on top of the painted piece. This is the design's already done. I'm going to come here and I'm going to do a little bit of a thin, we'll do 3 kinds. Like a thinnish, thickish kind of a thing. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put on a scooper duper scoop of crackle. And I'm not going to play in it a whole lot. I am going to just leave that puppy alone. Put on some more. Now this looks really weird because like you've painted this design, right? And I mean you can see this on camera. This is flat and smooth and shiny. This has a little bit of milkiness to it. And this is totally milky. That's super thick. It's, I don't know measurements, but it's thick. So as this dries, what we'll do is we'll show afterwards how this turns out. But if you were doing this crackle medium on, say, this Lazy Susan piece, I can get that piece over here, you would put it that thick over the entire piece if you wanted the cracks to be thick, okay? If you wanted them to be thick. If you wanted them to be tinier, then you would put it much thinner, okay? The thinner your crackle medium, like out here at the edges usually tend to get thin. You can barely see the cracks. If you have a small piece of painted piece, then the small cracks might be perfect. But on this larger piece, it is infinitely more beautiful to have these larger cracks. So you definitely want to pay attention to how much medium depending on the size of your surface. Now because this is so wet, this is going to level out and it's going to do its own thing kind of. And so we'll just leave this alone and let it dry overnight and we'll get back to it tomorrow. Here we have our finished 3 samples. I'll get in nice and close for you. Okay, and you can see, there's, let's get you in the light, there's our thick one, and there's our thin one, and then this doesn't have any crack on it whatsoever. I'm going to get a paintbrush out, and what you do to make this stuff show up is you go into a little bit of paint with water, and then you glaze over the top of it. Okay, and that will make, that color will settle into those cracks. You could do a white color, you could do a black color, you could do whatever color you want. It was even feeding along because it's so thin. Okay, sometimes if you wipe it right back off, it won't actually settle into the cracks, so sometimes I let it sit. So if I do this, now see I've got a little surface staining right there. What I do to prevent that is I get a little bit of water, and when it dries just a little bit longer, I buff it out. Okay. Okay, so you can see, I'm going to go telephoto a little bit more. I'm replacing this camera with one that'll come in much tighter. Yeah, this one is just not. Okay, so you can definitely see that the thicker is what is required, and you can see how thick it is. There's a ridge there even. This is almost useless. You just have. Okay, this piece is my certification, my first submission for my certification board. Now, overall finish does not count that much. This is not a passing board. Okay, and that's okay because I didn't expect to pass my first year because I was learning. Okay, but when I feel this surface, when I let my fingers do the walking, it is smooth, smooth, smooth. Now, when I came to my frame, I have sharp stuff going on here in the edges. I'm not sure why I stopped when I got to the frame. I don't even know, but where this cut edge is, there's definitely some sharp stuff going on. So, when you have a piece, you want to do, generally with decorative painting, it's items that are not hanging on a wall, so you're going to have people touching them. This is very sharp in here. I needed to pay way more attention to finish and to wet sanding and some things like that. On the back, I wanted to show you. Now, you're not allowed to put, you're not allowed to mount this into the board very well, and you have to put your number on the back. When I did the back of my piece, and they do notice this because they notice it. The back of my board is sanded equally as well, and I've spattered and added some decorative detail on my numbering. When you're doing any kind of piece, and this is the envelope that has my certification results, you can look at those on the website. When you're doing a piece, you need to do every piece like it's your certification piece. You need to pay attention to that back. People are going to flip your piece over. They're going to look at the bottom or the back or whatever. And they're going to judge you on it. No matter what, they're going to judge you on it. Whether you're selling or whether or not you are just painting for friends and family or for yourself. Okay, so this frame needed to have as much attention paid to it as I did on this centerpiece. Okay, when you're getting ready to wet sand and you're thinking to yourself, should I wet sand or shouldn't I wet sand? Then questions that you want to ask yourself are, do I have a lot of bumps and things that are intrinsic to the design? In the case of lace, and you won't be able to see it, but I have a lot of bumps because these are all dip dots from the backs of brushes or stylus. If I wet sand this piece, those bumps are going to get rubbed because they're high points. Okay, so every time you have a high point, it gets rubbed extra. You don't want that. And then the other thing, this is a plastic candle. This is a friendship candle set that I did for a magazine. And so this has a little battery light thing. But this is a plastic candle, and so when you're painting on plastic, it's a tender surface. So I don't want to wet sand on something that is a tender surface, meaning that I might separate the paint from my surface. Wood is never a problem. Tin generally is not a problem as long as you have good adherence, and you can do a test spot on the bottom of that to check it. But wood is 100% never a problem with that. So always check your piece and make sure that you have good adherence before you start thinking about wet sanding. And then make sure that you have the protection of layers in between. I want to talk about wet sanding. The product that you're going to use for wet sanding is called Superfilm. And this comes in a disc, but I like the flat sheets just a little bit better than the disc. The disc is hard. In the case of sandpaper, I like the discs much better than the flat. But in case of wet sanding, I like that better. Why would you wet sand? Well, first of all, it's just when we talk about heirloom finishes, the better feeling your piece is, then the better the appearance. It's going to just elevate your level of painting. So what I have here is I have a Lazy Susan. This is going to go on my table, and you put it on a spindle and you can change the panels and stuff. What I have is, if you listen to my hand, okay, you can kind of hear how rough this is. I'm going to go back to my CDA board that I took 9 million hours on and listen when I rub my hand on this. Okay. So you can see this is obviously very smooth, and if I took a piece of tin, let's say, okay, you can see that that's smooth as well. So this is very smooth. This just feels, I mean, you just want to live on this. You just want to touch it and, you know, that kind of thing. It is inviting to you just because of touch. Now, some things will hang on the wall like this, and maybe you would never touch them. But something like this is going to be used every day. It's going to be touched and all that kind of stuff. So you want it to be, you know, welcoming and quality in every way. Also, when I turn, got a good window glare thing going on here, so you can see right about here in this area, it is really a rough looking finish, okay, and that also detracts. Okay, now this is rougher because I wanted tooth because this is a dry brush project, but because I got the tooth, does that mean that I have to have it that rough? No, it doesn't. Okay, so we're going to take our wet sanding disc, and there's two sides to it, and they're pretty much the same, so just, you know, you can use either side. You're going to, this always freaks people out. The one thing you have to have is you want at least 3 to 5 good coats of varnish on here. Otherwise, you are going to be toast. Okay, you definitely have to have the varnish. If you don't have varnish on here, then it won't be protected and you'll sand the paint off, okay? And this is, listen to how that's very, very smooth. Here's, can you hear the difference? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to dip our wet sanding disc into water, and then we're just going to hold it. I'm going to work on just this area right here, and we're going to rub gently. Just rubbing. What you want to look for, and I've got a little bit of color coming off. If you have color coming off on your disc, then that means your paint's coming off. Okay, so you don't want the paint to come off. I'm just going to keep going because I know about where my level of risk is. Okay, and you can re-wet. You can put more water on there if you want to. And the other thing that you can do is if you start, sometimes these sanding discs will suck onto these things. You just put 1 squirt of dish soap on your piece, okay, and that keeps everything from sticking. It's a lot smoother. And you just can rinse off your disc. And then what you do, you got soap on there, you don't want to let that sit. Get a wet paper towel or, you know, dishcloth or whatever, and you get all that soap scum stuff off of there. I put quite a bit on there for how little an area. Okay, and then dry paper towel. Okay. Now I didn't do it for very long, but the like we have very rough here. This is already ultimately smoother. You wouldn't believe what a difference this makes. It's just amazing. Dry up all the mess here. Okay. So what I do at conventions when I'm showing how to do this is I let people, I do just one section like this of a piece, and then I have them rub their hands over it, and they immediately can settle on where that has been sanded. Now what will happen when you wet sand? Okay, so what's neat about that, I'm going to backtrack just a second. What's neat about the wet sanding is it can actually elevate a rough finish that you wanted tooth on and bring it up to a smooth finish like you base coated it smooth to begin with. And now listen to the difference. See, it's already just with a few little swipes, and you didn't see me, you know, pressing and all that kind of stuff. I would definitely advise, if you see color, stop and put a couple more coats of varnish on, and then you'll get a really smooth finish. One of the things that can happen when you wet sand is you will see, almost like when you scratch on, you know, a dry, like a pre-varnish, you might see some hazy, like dusty looking surface kind of thing, like you did just sand. Okay, what you do after you get done wet sanding is you apply one final coat of varnish, or you wax. And so that'll take us to our next conversation. This is Clapham's Beeswax Salad Bowl Finish. You could probably use other types of finish, and this is, you know, this is what it looks like inside there, and it'll last you a long time. But what's neat about this product is it is a food safe product. Okay, so you can actually, what you could do, what that means is it's going to put a barrier in between your varnished painted piece and whatever edible that you, like if you're going to put cookies on here, or if you were going to you know, serve bread out of a bowl, you can use this in there. You can use a salad bowl. So this makes something food safe, so it's very, very safe. So I just have fail safe to only using this brand of wax. What you can do is you take your paper towel, and you can wear gloves if you want to, and you're just going to apply just a nice even coat. You just smear it on, thin coat, smear it on, and okay, so you apply your coat of wax, nice even coat. I was reading my label. I wanted to make sure that it was telling you exactly what the manufacturer said. It says, so with any wax, any kind of wax, you're going to need to let it dry. And it seems like if the wax comes out of here wet, or like that form, and then you put it on here and it's still wet, it seems like it's never going to be dry. But it takes time to dry, so leave it aside for a day or two. And then when it is dry, what you want to do is you want to buff it with another clean dry paper towel or steel wool, and you want to buff it to a shine, and that's the hardest, nicest finish that you can make. That's what I recommend for your, you know, just anything that's going to be of quality of last, you know, if you want it to be timeless, then go take the extra steps with the finish. So for 3 to 5 coats of varnish, you will wet sand, you will then wax, okay, or you can revarnish and then wax. And then you can refresh this as you need to. You can put another coat of the wax on as well. So that's going to give you your most wonderful, rich, elegant finish. But this was saying you can use it wet. So if you have stuff on there and you wanted to use the piece, then you can use it while it's wet. And it also says it's got nice uses. It's a mineral oil and beeswax finish, and it's good for salad bowls, fruit bowls, butcher blocks, cutting boards, kitchen cabinets, children's wooden toys, and cribs. Boy, if they're recommending it for cribs, that's pretty amazing stuff. Anyway, but I've used this product for speaking just a few minutes ago about the difference in roughness of this board and the difference in the pumpkin board. But what's really interesting, I rolled this surface. I rolled it with a roller, and the difference in how I rolled it is the secret in getting a really, really smooth texture. I can't quite remember if I showed this or not, but when you have rollers and you don't want to clean them out, put them in a baggie. Take the heads off, put them in a baggie, and they will stay good for a long time. You can remount them and get a new baggie and restore it. It's wonderful. Okay, the difference between a surface that's smooth when you roll it and one that is not is going to be in how long you roll. And that sounds totally goofy, but it totally works. But the difference between the smooth is you roll until your roller starts singing at you, which means that you just keep rolling the wet paint over and over and over and over and over again. And you'll hear it. You'll hear that there's kind of like a little music to it. It'll be a different sound when it's juicy. And it takes a little bit of patience. To get a texture that is chunky so that you can dry brush and catch all those little bumps, you're going to use thicker paint. And as soon as you get it spread out, you're going to stop, and there's all these little cabrumples everywhere, okay? And if I wanted to keep going, you'll notice, and you just play with this yourself at home, it's kind of fun. You'll notice the longer you roll, the smoother it gets. Smoother and smoother and smoother. You can control how much tooth or how much tooth you don't have, that you do or do not have on by just continuing to roll or using more generous paint. Say that you want an even texture, but more even texture. What you do is you take a texture medium and you can apply it onto your piece. Okay, just kind of get it on there, kind of spread it out. And then you can take one of these rubberized devices and you kind of squeegee it. So if I wanted to have, you know, an irregular texture to dry brush with, then that is what I would do. Is I would apply, you could cut your own out of cardboard. You could swirl. And then when you dry brush on this, it's going to catch on all those little bumps, and the texture will be another element of your layer. We're going to pretend like this piece is going to be antiqued, okay? Now, what is cool, you can see actually that I attempted to do some corner shading and a little bit of antiquing on this, and once again I would say I wimped out and didn't get enough. I grabbed Deep Midnight Blue. I'm hoping that it'll go. I think it's going to be a little too kind of green blue, but we're just going to use this because I'm going to show you how you can wipe it off too. And you get some of your extender, whoever's extender you like. And what you can do, now pretend like this is an oil medium as well. This is the same exact technique and tips as you would use for oil. So what you do, make sure you have your piece protected with varnish, because if it's not, then the stain or the paint will stick into all the little pores and you'll never get it out, so make sure you are varnished. Then you take your dry paper towel or a brush and you wipe on a protective barrier, if you will. This is going to allow your antiquing to move around. So this will keep it wet for a while. It'll keep it mobile so it won't just stick. Okay, now you can use the same wet. I need a little bit more. Okay, so my table is crooked and my medium is running down the table. Okay, so I'm going to get it nice and moistened. You do not want it to look like a lake. It needs to be flat wet, not sloppy wet. Okay, now I'm going to just dip into a little corner of my paint right there. And I'm just going to put it in where I want the darkest area. Okay, and I can bring it out into my piece if I want to. I can bring a whole lot of paint out. You think I don't like that piece of fruit over there, you know, now you can't even see it. Okay, now we're going to put away our sloppy piece, and gosh, I'm really going through the paper towels. And we're going to get a dry paper towel. There's a couple ways that you can blend when you're going to antique. One, you can start out here with a dry paper towel and just kind of rub into the medium, bringing it back softly, softly where you want it to stay. Okay. Just knock that back. You know, I got a whole piece of fruit back here you can't even see, but it could be a very appealing thing to have that ability to hide a few things. You know, the eye knows it's seeing something. I think this could be a good thing. Okay, so now say that's sticking just a little bit. Pick up a little bit of your medium and you can clean off the piece, like I want that shine gone or whatever. You can just take your medium and, you know, wipe it straight back in. Now the other thing you can do is you can do a mop blending. Use like Maxine's mop and you just will move your paint around. Okay, and you soften, soften, soften. Now if you get like an area like this where these aren't moving very well, you can slip slap those and make them move. Okay, rub them. Okay, and now mop. Okay. And then that brings that nice and soft up here. The way you clean your mop, if you're going to be using it on and on, is you go into a spot on your paper towel with medium and you just clean it off that way. Okay. Now, you're going to play with this until you get it perfectly smooth, unless you want it stronger. Okay, so you, once again, just like the rolling, you can decide how much you have. Okay. Totally get that going. I can come up here and I can just make that dark corner just stay dark by mopping right there in that corner. Wipe it off and then come down here and mop some more. Now that's not moving for me, so I'm gonna rub on that because I know I'm gonna want it lighter over here anyway. Wipe it off because that excess will just get put right back on there. And then we start mopping that. And then we can get our transition. Okay, so you just play with your mops. Okay, so when you're looking at something, and this isn't done, but when you're looking at something that's antique, notice that your eye comes into this like area here. Whereas, in this case, if this was the bottom of my board, I did do some shading, but this is very unattractive in that it just drops off and there's a whole wall of this dropped off kind of tablecloth thing. So we don't like that. Okay, we want, this would definitely benefit from some antiquing down here. Now, if I don't want the antiquing on there at all, or I think I hate it, then you go back into either water or your medium, because you had the medium protecting it and the varnish. You just take that all right back off. Okay. And when you get it all cleaned off, then you're done and you can try another color or, you know, whatever you think. Oops. Okay, this is my Believe banner. Okay. This is a series, I did a series of banners for hanging by your door. My thought was you'd hang it outside by your door, by the entrance. But this is outside. Now if I want this to hang outside, then I'm going to have to protect this. Okay, now the way, this is canvas, and this is actually Rocklon. Rocklon is a drapery lining fabric that is a little kind of, not very kind of foamy, but maybe a little bit. It's definitely thicker than cloth, you know what I mean? It's got a very smooth side. This side is the real smooth side, and you can use this actually for video projection screening as well. You can use it for floor cloths. You can use it indoor, outdoor. It's weatherproof, all that kind of stuff. You can cut it. It doesn't fray. It doesn't roll. But if I was going to hang this outside, like out on one of those flagpole type things, then I would finish my backside with a color or something. And then I would use exterior varnish on both sides of this piece. And I would do 5 coats. I would do a lot of coats of varnish. Okay, and the reason you're going to use exterior varnish, what exterior varnish actually has in it, like a sunscreen for your paint. So it will help prevent fading as well as just weatherproofing and stuff. So it is the perfect product to use for outside. So always exterior varnish. And also if you're going to be doing coasters, placemats, Lazy Susans, anything that's going to come in contact with moisture, then please use an exterior varnish, because and if you're going to do coasters and things like that, also use the wax as well. So on this I wouldn't use wax, but I would definitely do about 5 coats, and you can roll on your varnish. Okay, when we're looking at our board, let's see if I can get you some reflection going here. We're looking at our board. There you go. Can you see which side you think looks more even with just a single coat of varnish? Now the one thing that's going to happen is with multiple coats of varnishes, it's going to start evening the texture out. See on here, this right here, that is where the varnish really didn't hit, which is why you need a nice even coat. This is a really big reason for putting extender in with your varnish or water, so that you can do an even thick-ish thin coat. And that way, if you want to have a thicker coat and you don't want to just use the varnish sponge or whatever, then what you need to have is a leveling device. And be really careful about how you're varnishing. If you're varnishing and you've got 15 cats running around, you're going to end up with hairs getting caught in there. So don't re-varnish over something with like hairs and fuzz. We talked about pouring varnish. Okay, I've got my varnish on this thing, and we go on here. I'm gonna move this over to the corner, and I'm going through millions of paper towels. All right, so I've got my varnish on here. It's all smooth and everything right here, but I've poured on my varnish and I can't get it to even out. I don't know why when I was varnishing that plate, I put so much varnish on a project that I had done, a Debbie Cole project. I did just like this, where I had a ton. I mean, you can totally see all the ridges of varnish. And I didn't think of taking it and wiping it off on a paper towel and eliminating some of that varnish. I can't even begin to tell you why I think I'm so stupid for not thinking of that. But I didn't. And so then I ended up with this beautiful project. I was perfectly painted, gorgeous, and I ended up with streaky varnish. And I'm going to let this dry and we'll show you how that wet sanding can save this. Alright, this is the terribly bad varnish job that I did. Now, let's see if I can get you reflected. You can see some streaks here, but I have to say, now I did everything wrong that I could have done wrong. I poured on my varnish, I left it sitting on there, I didn't smooth it some more, and then I set it, you can hear in the background, I've got a little heater, space heater right under my table. I set it right on the floor, right next to my chair, right next to the heater, and this is that Traditions varnish, and look at how much it leveled out, even though I had all those big ridges and stuff on it. That's amazing. Okay, so in order to rescue this, what we would do is nice and thick varnish, we would get out our wet sanding. Okay, and I can't find my wet sanding. Oh, here it is. You're going to use your wet sanding. I think I'm dry. And you're going to just knock back that varnish. You're going to press a little bit harder than you did before. You're going to make sure you have enough coats of bad varnish on there. Okay, and I don't have too much color coming off on here. You can hear it scratching away at things. And what you'll do is you'll just keep kind of wet sanding it. You start seeing those streaks go away. Okay, still no color on my piece. And that's a good thing. I'm going to be careful if you have any raised bumps like we talked about. And this is going to knock this bad finish down. It's also going to make it very, very, very fine. Very nice finish. Okay, for the sake of argument, let's say that we're done. Okay, you also want to use a little bit of water to rinse off your dry rubbing. Okay, now this will show you those kind of scratchy, which you'll see when you get done, why you have to put another coat on. Okay, so see how that's kind of white, milky looking. Okay, and it's also not as shiny anymore. But what it is it's looking awful smooth. Okay, and it is as, listen, you can't hear anything. Now listen over here. Okay, that's how smooth the wet sanding makes it. That is just an amazing step. Okay, so we would go into our varnish, not pouring it on our piece. Get our brush. We would apply another thin, fine coat, or you get your varnish sponge out, whichever method you like. Thin, fine coat of varnish. Do not put it next to the heater. And then you can wax your piece.